let's just reflect on where we came in. People often say, solar power is huge, there's far more sunshine hitting the Earth than humanity consumes, so we can easily live on solar power. This is technically true. This yellow square shows if everyone on this map, if 1 billion people in Europe and North Africa wanted to have a European level of energy consumption entirely from solar power, this yellow square could deliver that to them. You fill this yellow square with concentrating solar power, and everyone could have 125 light bulbs of power. And this square is sometimes said to be a very small square because it's so much smaller than the Sahara Desert, but it is the same size as Germany. And there's a similar message in the United States and the rest of North America. If you wanted to power the 500 million people of Canada, Mexico, and the USA, all at the Americans' current standard of living of 250 kilowatt hours per day per person with solar power alone, then you would need a solar facility of just the same size, a Germany-sized one, which is slightly smaller than Texas. And you could say, well, don't be silly, we don't only want solar. Well, I agree, you could have a mix, but if the mix includes other renewables, the square only gets bigger. So what we need to be visualizing for America, if we want to make a plan for getting off fossil fuels, is even with all the efficiency measures that we were discussing earlier, we need to be talking about wind farms the size of California, about solar power stations the size of Arizona, and about nuclear power stations increased 5-fold over today's levels. That's an example of a plan that might add up. In conclusion, getting off fossil fuels is not going to be easy, but it is possible, and it may even be fun. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Some questions. We have a couple of microphones here, so if people would like to ask questions of David, please hold up your hands, and we'll try to accommodate many of you. Down here, please, first. Wait for the microphone, because that way we can get it on videotape.
Yeah, can you comment on the role of how much energy it costs to create a Texas-sized bank of photovoltaics and how that enters into the equation?
Okay, what's the energy cost of making these sort of things? Solar facilities in other people's deserts, wind farms, nuclear power stations. Did I include that in my calculations? No, I just assumed they were free things. So this is, if for free we could have these facilities, what would add up? So I left out the energy cost of making them. For most of these facilities, the energy cost is much smaller than the energy they will produce in their lifetime. So as a physicist, I'm happy making this approximation that I've left out the energy cost of making them, which was perhaps 5% or so of the energy that they'll generate in their life. That's not true for all technologies, however. Photovoltaic panels, at the moment with today's technology, are very energy intensive to make. So it's a very important question to ask. As for the solar power stations using concentrating solar power in deserts, I don't actually know what their energy cost is, and I think it's a good idea to carry on doing some research and development and see what will happen to the financial cost and the energy cost of making them.
I should have added, not to embarrass you, but just it would be great if you also just say who you are so David knows who you are and what your affiliation is. Next question, in the back there, please.
Hopefully there won't be any feedback. You mentioned that one thing that individuals could do to reduce their energy consumption was to become a vegetarian. And I would like to challenge that assumption. Now, I think that factory farming is indefensible and it is very energy intensive because of the use of grains. But if you grass feed animals, you are not only using less energy, and in fact you're using solar energy, but you are increasing the amount of topsoil that you're generating. Whereas if you are factory farming grains and soy, you're using an enormous amount of petrol in the form of fuel and fertilizer. Not only that, you are also depleting the soil and the topsoil. So you mentioned that Massachusetts does not have any deserts yet. Well, Iraq didn't used to be a desert. It used to be part of the Fertile Crescent, and it is now a desert because of excess grain agriculture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the question is, vegetarian or carnivore, what's better? And obviously it's complex and depends on the country and the geography and exactly how you feed the animals and so forth. But here's some numbers relating to energy consumption. The energy going into you, if you're an average human, is about 3 kilowatt hours per day. You could get that directly from plants. If you eat meat instead, then that queue of animals lining up waiting to be eaten by you have to have plants going into them. And it takes about 1,000 cow days to make a cow. And so the queue of animals that you live on is quite substantial and weighs quite a lot more than you do. And they're not 100% efficient at turning the energy in the plants into energy that gets into you. So you end up with a footprint that's quite a lot bigger. Something like 15 kilowatt hours per day is the chemical energy that is going into the mouths of the animals. Now, you say, no, that's not the full story. Absolutely, because real farming involves fertilizer, tractors, processing, and so forth, which also has an energy cost. So what I told you so far is just the energy going into the mouths of the animals. In terms of fertilizer costs, yes, it depends how you make your grain and how you make your vegetarian food. And if you're in a country like New Zealand or Wales, where you have very mountainous terrain and you can have sheep run around, maybe it's a good way to harvest that biomass. But the land requirement for the carnivore's lifestyle is indeed bigger. And in the future, in 2050, if we're serious about getting off fossil fuels, we really need to ask, where are we going to get our energy from? I talked about wind, nuclear, and solar in deserts. Another option is biomass. And there are many processes that we depend on with our modern lifestyle, such as industrial processes, chemical processes, flying, freight, international shipping, which run on fossil fuels at the moment. And to defossilize those, perhaps we need to be looking at, for some of them, at biomass as a source. And so perhaps there's going to be a tension in land use in terms of wanting to get energy from land areas. And this map visualizes what you would need to do to get 5 kilowatt hours per day per person from wood in Britain, and that's shown by these green areas. And then for biofuels, this yellow box here is showing the contribution of 2 kilowatt hours per day per person from biofuels, which would be delivered by these yellow areas on the map in Scotland and all over England. This, remember, is just 5% of today's consumption of liquid fuels for transport. So I completely agree that agriculture is a complex thing, and that the choice between being a carnivore and a vegetarian is not a trivial one, but I think it's important to look very carefully at the numbers.
Another question over here.
Hi there. My name is Michael, and I'm an undergraduate at the college. My question is, for all your calculations, you've sort of taken data for current technology, but you haven't factored in, any improvements that may occur. I was just curious, was that just because forecasting improvements is a very sketchy business, or I guess, what are your expectations in terms of efficiency improvements and cost improvements in these technologies?
Okay. How close are we to the limits of the laws of physics? Can these technologies get far better? Let's talk about wind first. This remarkable photograph visualizes the wake effect of one wind turbine on the other wind turbines in the wind farm. Windmills are already very close to the physical limit of what a disc-shaped energy extractor can deliver. The Betz limit says you can get about 59% out of the wind, and these are delivering about 50%. If you pack them closer together, you wouldn't do any better because the wake effects would get worse. So windmills are at the physical limit. You could make them taller and bigger, and then you'd get more power per turbine, but you'd have to space them further apart, so the power per unit area would stay much the same. It would just increase very slightly because of the increased wind speed. So I don't see a prospect for a massive improvement in the power per unit area, though the costs may come down, the financial costs, which I haven't talked about at all today. On the photovoltaic end of things, what could happen to photovoltaics? How close are they to the limits of physics? Well, standard photovoltaics today are single-junction photovoltaics, and the physical limit for them is you can have, in principle, 31% efficiency at converting sunlight into electricity, and you can't do any better. That's the Shockley-Queisser limit. And they're already at an efficiency of 20% with today's photovoltaics, so remarkably close to that limit. So again, that's a technology I don't see getting much better in terms of the area required for it. In fact, I think what's going to happen is hopefully the costs are going to come way down because photovoltaics are still too expensive, and they'll come down along with a reduction in efficiency, I would expect, which will be okay. As long as they get much, much cheaper, we might be happy for the efficiency to drop down to 10% or so. So what I've tried to do in this work is indicate what the limits of the laws of physics are. In terms of technologies, I do hope there will be technological breakthroughs. I hope we'll come up with cheaper, smaller storage systems for storing electrical energy, lighter batteries, and so forth. Heat stores in buildings. I hope heat pumps are going to get more efficient. But I've tried to take a realistic view using today's technology and the limits of physics.